take their place and run as the governor, as the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum. The PDP Governors Forum then came and endorsed this decision.
Many believe that the result of the NGF election is a huge blow to the presidency, which had lobbied for the removal of Governor Amechi as chairman of the Governors Forum. That wish may still come true, though it is hard to envisage whether an endorsement can produce the chairman of the Governors Forum. This may eventually be a matter for the courts to decide, but the truth for now is that two separate persons now lay claim to be chairman of the Governors Forum.
Welcome back. Now that was a report by Kayode on the recently concluded NGF elections. With Victor and I in the studio to talk about this is Kayode Otitoju, who is a politician. Wonderful to have you in the studio this morning, sir.
Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
But one body, two chairmen. And the two chairmen in dispute are both from the PDP. On this program a couple of times we have talked about your party, the PDP, and how it continues to self-destruct. Is this one of those problems of internal democracy in the PDP, or is it just beyond? Let's look at the just concluded Nigeria Governors Forum election, and what do you think really is playing out here?
You see, we that are real core members of PDP, we are not happy at what is happening or what is playing itself out in the party. It's like a house divided against itself, and it's not the best, because at the end of the day, politics is a game of number. If a party should be divided the way it is now between Jang and Amechi, at the end of the day, you are giving room for opponents to have a field day whenever there is general election. And so people like me in particular, I'm not happy at what is happening. I don't want to know who won, who didn't win, who was selected, or who was selected. All those are unnecessary semantics that don't really make sense to real party leaders. And it's now, so unfortunate.
Looking at the Nigerian Governors Forum, why has this body become such an important organization, even though it is not recognized in the Constitution, never existed until the governors decided to come together to form it, probably to have a united front to be able to, entrench what they call true federalism, if you like, to have some kind of autonomy over their affairs and the affairs of the states that they govern. But why has this body become so important and its election becomes so important that it begins to look like what some people have said, a do or die affair for your party, the PDP?
You see, really, just like any association, people come together, they have common things to, propagate and, implement. And it's always good to have such association. And it was in the national interest when it was the real Nigerian Governance Forum. Now, it's difficult to know whether we can still put Nigeria before Governance Forum. Because when I was listening to the prelude to this interview, Governor Jang was saying, yes, the northern governors came together and endorsed. Okay, is it meant for northern governors? The chairman of Northern Governors Forum is the governor of Niger State. You get my point? When things are to be subjected to election, there shouldn't be any empire building. You go straight to the venue, and an election must have a venue, it must have a time, and it must have what you will use as instrument of voting, either by raise of hand, either by ballot paper, or what have you, where a selection is done without these factors, then it's not an election.
But what about the issue, Victoria? Sorry, I know you have a lot to ask now, but what about what the Akwa Ibom State Governor said, that the incumbent chairman conducted the election and provided, ballot papers and all of that? I don't know what the constitution of the Governors Forum say, but do you think that this could have any bearing on that election, or would subject it to controversy of any sorts?
Well, just as I said, this is an association. They don't have a constitution. Okay? Maybe they just have working agreement and in the interest of oneness of Nigeria. So, even the election, I don't think there is something showing dogmatically this the path to follow. The most important thing is that, where have they been holding their meetings? Was the election held there? Was everybody partake in the election? If all these were satisfied, then that was an election.
Okay.
If you say, yes, you didn't resign before the election took place, that ought to have been fought. That ought to have been fought before the commencement of the election. The moment all of you subject yourself to ballot boxing and whatever, then that means you agreed the modus operandi for that election or that selection. And that is the norm anywhere in the world.
Okay, now let's look at some of the issues that are said to be surrounding the election. They say the incumbent NGF leader refused to dissolve the executive, and they realized that the ballot papers were not serialized. I want to talk about the importance of serialized ballot papers to this election. And then let's also remember that at some point there was the PDP NGF.
Yeah, in fact, when I could remember, I was in the studio here with one pro-democracy or someone. Immediately, Akpabio emerged as chairman of
why are we having multiple leaders like this?
Well, there is nothing bad in having PDP Governors Forum. ACN has, okay? Other parties, they have common things they discuss among themselves. But where the only grounds I have to grant on this is that the chairman of Nigerian Governors Forum is PDP. There should not, I don't think it was necessary to have another chairman of PDP Governors Forum within the Governors Forum, because by design, PDP has 23 governors out of 36.
You know, the question I want to ask is, do you think having the PDP...
I'm coming there. I'm coming to
yes.
there.
Do you think all these problems led up to this point, where we're having some declared as leader and somebody else taking up the leadership position? Or somebody else, someone winning the election and somebody else declaring himself winner?
Well, I don't think there is problem with serialization of ballot papers. Because how many people? I mean, the ballot paper you needed for Governors Forum shouldn't be up to 40. So you don't have to serialize. And these are people who are leaders, the #1 citizen of their states. So they are men of caliber, and you get my point. So you don't have to subject them to primary school balloting type of thing. Okay? So it wasn't necessary for the ballot papers to be serialized. Okay? Because the number of people involved was less than 3 dozen.
Okay, after the NGF elections, 19 of those governors came out and they held a meeting with Governor Jang, and they all had they wrote down, he gave a speech, they had their names on papers with signatures, and he declared Jonah Jang winner. Now, what happened between that time when Amaechi was said to have won the election to that period where Jonah Jang went into that meeting with the 18 other governors?
You see, the problem is still traceable to PDP structure and as a party. I'm a very strong member of PDP. I contested primaries governorship. I've served as Commissioner for Information under the party in Ekiti. You get my point? So I'm a serious member of the problem is still the party structure and party discipline. There is no discipline in that party. And that's the problem. If there had been discipline, if PDP didn't want Amaechi to recontest, PDP would have been bold enough to tell Amaechi, don't appear for election. Don't even pick the form. But nobody to bear the cart. Or now, maybe there was someone to bear the cart, but Amaechi may be adamant. So it still boiled down to indiscipline.
All right,
there was a time the speakership of the House of Rep was to come from PDP, and it was to come from a certain zone, Southwest. But the incumbent collaborated with other party members, some party members, and with opponents in the House, and emerged as the speaker. Yesterday I was watching the honor bestowed on ex-governor Bola Tinubu, the leader of AC, by Kano University. One of the people at hand to give him support was Tambuwa. No party discipline, nobody is interested in the party among the so-called leaders. Tambuwa is supposed to be the number 4 citizen in this country from PDP. Okay. But he romances with opponents just...
Okay. Let me ask this question now. Obviously, there are two factions of the NGF as we speak. Now, let's talk about the stance of the president when it comes to who actually is winning the drama. Now, the president has said that he has nothing to do with it and he did not influence the elections. But at this point, when an election is held and somebody emerges winner, and everybody acknowledges that this person is winner, and something happens and something just changes the whole scenario, what stance do you think the president should be taking? What do you think should be guiding the president's decision on maybe whose side to take?
You see, by our party structure, apart from chairman of the party, that's Alhaji Bamanga Tuko, the leader of the party is the president, because the president emerges the president from the party. And he was in position to make things okay before all this rubbish. Because I can call it rubbish. He's the party leader. He's the number 1 party leader. But not the number 1 party man. The number 1 party man is the chairman of the party. Okay? You don't wait for things to degenerate to this level. Because at the end of the day, it will affect him. It will. Because he's the president of this country, all the governors owe allegiance to him. Either you are an AC or ANPP or whatever. And where there is line of cleavage, and you now have 19 against 16 and whatever, it's not in the best interest of the country. And anything that has national, this thing as operational zone, is the baby of the president.
Now, people have said that this is just this one is the latest in a series of issues that the presidency or the president has had with Governor Amaechi. Now, what do you, apart from the fact that some observers had said that it has to do with the poster that emerged with Amechi as a running mate to Sule Lamido of Jigawa in 2015. And of course, against that backdrop with the president, though he hasn't said it, but his ambition to recontest in 2015. What do you really think is at the core of this unending? Remember that the private jet belonging to River State had been grounded, and a lot of issues emerged from that. Even before then, there has been, as we speak, policemen deployed to Obiakpo local government area in Bayelsa State, River State, I beg your pardon. We also had the protests on the streets of Port Harcourt for Amechi to, resign from office. With all of these things, what do you think is at the core? Is at the core of all of this? And is it actually true that the president is having a running battle with the River State governor? And of course, that could have informed the decision not to accept the re-election or thereabouts of Governor Amechi.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, when all this election took place, and I don't know whether he has returned now, but Mr. President has not been in the country for quite 2 or 3 days now. Okay, so he wasn't around, and so he wouldn't have pitched tent with one at the expense of
but in the build-up to this election, I mean, before now.
But it says, the senior advisor media had come out that Mr. President has no hands in this, and whoever becomes chairman of NGF, fine. I mean, this is because there could be rumor, there could be speculation, but where someone comes out openly and say, yes, I don't have hand in this type of thing, why can't you just take the person and, take him by his word? Because at the end of the day, he must work with the two supposedly factionalized bodies, the Amechi camp and the Jank camp. And Jank camp is a Pabio camp, if I got you correctly. You get my point? But at the end of the day, he's the president of this country. There is nothing that is vital that president does pertaining to any state, either is governed by ACN or whatever, that president doesn't consult with the governor. So the problem, all these things, the problem I see is the problem of PDP. It's not the problem of Nigeria. Because at the end of the day, it will be difficult for PDP to feed any candidate now and think that actually it will have support from all the governors under PDP in all the states run by PDP. That's the problem.
Thank you so very much.
And if PDP can boast of delivering, the states governed by governance under PDP, then it's too bad. And that means, and if opponents should take this nation from PDP, it will be a sorry case, because they are worse.
All right, thank you very much, Sir Kayode Otitoju, a politician and member of the PDP, for coming to join us to bear your minds on the issues concerning the NGF election.
The rest of the show continues.
Thank
More
you.
interesting interviews coming up.
This interview. Welcome back.
Welcome back to this special program on Democracy Day. And we're being joined by another guest. His name is Sir Kayode Otitoju. He's a politician, a technocrat, fellow Institute of Logistics and Transport. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we were talking about security issues thus far. Today being democracy, 14 years, down the line. Now, we talked about tackling it where we were before you joined us. We talked about tackling it head on. And I know that approaches like, trying to bring on Amnesty for the terrorist group, because that's what we're looking at, and then also presently the emergency rule. And in the course of this, we've seen that, you know, there are conflicts, because at a point the president rejected the idea of amnesty, and then later a committee was set up, and now we also have the emergency rule that came up in 3 states. With the conflict in this issue, don't you think there's a political undertone?
Yes, thank you. You see, governance is not a static science. Okay, you know, at times you shift your stance when you know that this is what will be the popular stand. Okay, and once you are too rigid, then you are turned dictatorial. Okay, and it's under a dictatorial government that, you know, things are by decree. Now we're in democracy. If the president or the presidency had viewed, you know, the security situation as not, you know, necessary calling for amnesty initially, and now he shifts his stance, it means that actually he has hidden the popular call to maybe how to solve the problem in a way. Whether this will solve the problem is another question. You get my point? And it worked in the Niger Delta, though those were not terrorists.
You mean amnesty?
Amnesty worked in the Niger Delta area, though they were not terrorists. Okay, I think they were just class conscious, you know, or regional conscious people that wanted to fight for their own, you know, cut of the cake. And along the line, it became violent, and again, lives were lost, and again, because they were the master of the sea, because that was their domain, we thought that actually, for Nigerians to have peace, we had to bring amnesty, and it worked. That was during Yaradua, and which I think is still ongoing. But this one is real terrorism. Terrorism that you can't really pin to a cause. You can't pin it to either religion or whatever. You get my point. You don't really know the cause. And that's why people are saying amnesty for terrorists, amnesty for vandals, amnesty. You get my point. But when you are in position of authority and people keep on saying, maybe people within the region are saying, yes, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. What was okay for south-south should be okay for northeast or northwest. You get my point. And at times you come middle of the road, okay? And you say, okay, let me have amnesty that we still keep the government in power, because the governors and the local government, you know, people at the other 2 strata of administration are still in place. It's only the security aspect that is being taken up by, you know, declaring the, what do you call it?
State of emergency.
The state of emergency. And so, let's see how it works. But so far, so good. Since the state of emergency had been declared, wanton killing had slowed down.
Don't you think we would have done this, or we should have done this all these while?
Yes, I think if it were Obasanjo, you know, this thing would have been preemptive. But you know where Obasanjo is coming from. He was a military man. He was a no-nonsense man. You get my point? But in civilian, pure civilian, you know, democratic regime, pure civilian means that no military undertone, no nothing. You have to listen to the people, because, you know, in business, you measure business with profit. In politics, you measure, you know, success with popularity. Once you are not popular, you are failed. And there are some steps you will take that may not be that reasonable, but may may pop up your popularity a bit. So this is what is happening.
Drawing a line between popularity and what is right.
Exactly.
We'll get to that. But let me come back to you, Rear Admiral Akpan, and I want to ask you, fighting terrorism goes beyond military might. The fundamental problem of belief. Now, you can kill everybody, but if you leave one person that has that belief, that one person will radicalize several others to the tune of that belief. Do you think that our military might, in the long term, would give us a sustainable solution to this problem?
First, we need to first define what terrorism is. We need to know what are the causes. Then, of course, we can look at what are actually are symptoms that brings them to this violent stage in terms of actions that they take. We need to look at why, the reason why they act in that way. We also have to look at, it is when we know and we've defined what kind of terrorists that we have in our land, that we can now bring to bear what kind of strategy to put in place to tackle the issue of terrorism. The kind of terrorist act you have in other climes might not be the type that we have here. So it takes a lot of strategic thinking, a lot of strategic training, a lot of intelligence to be put in place to be able to get to the root causes of the kind of terrorist act that we had in Nigeria. That is why I said that when it arrived in our lands, it was a kind of surprise. So we needed to go through this process. The issue of preemptive action, putting the military the front line of our approach to terrorist act, could have backfired. I think the reason why we had to go through this gestation period was to find out the causes, the reason why, the issue of radicalism.
But have we been able to find the causes?
I will
to
think
get to the root. You know, we are looking at a lot of people have been speculative as to what could be the reason. Some people have said poverty, and poverty is across the board. You know, we cannot say that because people are poor. You know, some people have said and looked at the religious coloration of the crisis. Some people have looked at, but then again, we are not actually getting to the. My question to you really is finding a sustainable solution. Sustainability in the sense that what will work today will work tomorrow. Looking at some structures, some of these structures would have been there before even Nigeria's independence. How do they help in spreading the gospel of radicalization and extremism, which of course, for people to say Boko Haram, we are against Western education. But then again, you pass your message through the website, you pass your message through mail, you pass your message. So what really are we not doing right now?
One of the processes of tackling terrorism is to put in place a kind of strategy for de-radicalization of those that are already in the act, and to ensure that their kind of propaganda do not get to the other part of society. And the way to do about it is to ensure that their needs are met in terms of education, in terms of infrastructure, countering whatever are the kind of, should I say, propaganda that they impute into the people. So we need a kind of counter propaganda to whatever kind of propaganda they put into the people. De-radicalization is a very tedious process, and I think that because of the last 3-4 years, with the security system and all that are involved in tackling terror, I've put in place a strategy to de-radicalize those that have been cut in this web, and of course to try and ensure that they delineate the other members of society from being hooked by the propaganda of Boko Haram. I think we are sitting on top of it. With this period of gestation, we put in place strategy to be able to pursue. We put in place strategy to protect people from being radicalized. We put in place strategy to build up capacity to combat terror when it raises head. I think we have also put in place over the years some processes to mitigate when we are struck by the acts of terror. So, put in a nutshell, it came as a surprise, but I think the nation and the people of this country have built capacity. And you can hear from the utterances of other Nigerians condemning this act of terror. So we put in place, to a very good extent, all the kind of measures that you need to put in place to combat terror. It's not a capacity that you develop overnight. But I think in the past 2, 3, 4 years, we've built that capacity. Pursue terror, stop it in the border, de-radicalize security, put in place capacity, with, like in the training of anti-terrorist squads. it does not happen overnight. Building such capacity takes time. And I think we've done well in the past. We've partnered with other people that have had the experience. We've built also capacity to have a kind of de-radicalization unit in the system. We've also had in place process of mitigation. You find that when we have been hit by terror, we've put in place these organs and we've put in place this system and this mode to ensure that we build back confidence to the populace that were hit by terror acts. Terrorism is a very intrinsic act. The secrecy makes it more difficult to combat. But I think with the short period that we've experienced it, we've put in place the intelligence groups and kind of collaboration among agencies to ensure that we bring on board all our knowledge and we're able to combat the act of terror.
Thank you so much. Now, moving on to you, Mrs. Matosan. The president, while he was making a speech on terrorism, talked about, he said, while the emergency rule is in place, or rather, while dialogue will continue and discussions will continue. Now, for a group that has refused amnesty, saying that they don't want financial gains, you know, do you think dialoguing is in the best interest, apart from the emergency rule now? What do they have to discuss? And if they should discuss, that's if the federal government and this ethnic militia discusses, what do you think should be the basis of their dialoguing?
I think that the first issue that one would deal with is how do you talk to people that you do not see? Or how do you talk to a masked man? How will you see his expression or understand what his intentions are? So the issue of dialogue with people whose intentions are not favorable to your dialogue is dicey. But I think the primary issue here is that it is important for the Nigerian state to understand that it must emphasize its area of intelligence gathering and its use of intelligence. And also, it must understand the fact that we live in an interconnected society today. So that what happens outside of Nigeria, I mean, we must understand that Nigeria, no country is an island anymore. What happens outside of our borders has an effect on us. And in the issue we appear to be trying to solve now also has roots far into the crisis of Libya. When Libya fell, we did not think that it would affect us. But of course, it put arms in the hands of the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. All of that arms and people floated towards Nigeria, and also, unfortunately, got into the hands of undesirables and are causing problems here. So our federal government must understand this, that Nigeria is not living in isolation. And so in order to deal with the problem that is at hand, our security systems must be in order. We must be efficient in gathering and using of our information. And this brings to light, like my colleague said, security is not only an issue for the federal government or state government, it's also an issue for everybody. And you say, if it's an issue for everybody, we have to consider the fact that perhaps our infrastructure, security infrastructure at the moment is not in order. Perhaps this is the time to talk about state policing, because the people who are terrorists, who are members of Boko Haram, they live in communities. They are known by people who live in the area where they are. And they are not ghosts. And you would say, if they had local community policing, for example, it may have been easier to track them down or to get the information as regards how people are being radicalized than what we have now. Because in order to deal with the issue of radicalization of people, because what does radicalization do? Radicalization causes people to hold their beliefs above their lives and above the lives of others, in which case they take a decision that, no matter what, I'm prepared to lay my life down for blah, 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 blah. I don't care the number of people I kill in the process to achieve that political aim. That is, that is their plan. But the fact that we do not, so far, our security apparatus does not have a system of getting information from the lowest of the ladder, then we have a problem. We haven't tackled that.
We'll take a break now, but when we come back from this break, you're going to be telling us, you talked about information gathering.
Yeah.
What if you gather this information, especially when it's coming from the so-called leaders, because some politicians we've pointed at in the course of these terrorist attacks, people that sponsor these groups, and at the end of the day swings back and forth and nothing comes out of it. But you'll be giving us that answer.
The politicians who have allegedly have anything to do with them. We're taking a short break. It's still the Democracy Day special, very special program on Silverbird television. We'll be right back. Stay with us.